The last of the three founding thinkers in sociology that we'll discuss is Max Weber. For Weber, unlike Marx or Durkheim, there was no single cause, such as the economy or social fact, that affected social life. For Weber, interpretive understanding, or Verstehen, is the goal. Because of this, Weber was concerned with both rational and non-rational, or cultural explanations. Look at Figure 4.1 on page 142 for a graphic. Since for Weber the social world is contingent, that is, not set in stone in terms of invariant social arrangements or social facts, he developed the ideal type, a hypothetical perfect situation against which our actual social world is compared. Ideal type here, it should be noted, does not mean that there is a value judgment. In fact, Weber believed that analysis should be value-free. Ideal does not mean good, it's just an aspect of social life that is a pure hypothetical example. An ideal type could be the social organization of an automobile licensing office or a fast food chain. In fact, social life was, for Weber, becoming more and more characterized by rationalization. Remember at the beginning of your text when we discussed rationalization, the most inexpensive, fastest, and most effective way to accomplish a goal. This is an idea from Weber. Rationalization is the process in which social interactions and institutions are governed by methodical procedures and calculable rules to ensure speed, inexpensiveness, and as close to guaranteed outcomes as possible. See page 145, figure 4.2 for a graphic depiction of this. The mechanism that Weber saw as a logical way of ensuring a rational outcome is what Weber terms a bureaucracy. Now, everyone experiences a bureaucracy every day. What a bureaucracy is a type of organizational form, distinct from, say, your family or a religious organizational form, in that it exists explicitly to achieve a goal, a rational goal or goals. It is characterized by positions, not people, although people occupy the position. If you go to McDonald's, for example, usually, it does not matter who the cashier is, as long as they can take your order. And McDonald's is also characterized by a set of written guidelines. The cashier knows what to do, even though we may not see this because they have read the handbook or at least were trained by someone who had read. Bureaucracies are also characterized by a hierarchical organizational chart with positions rank ordered. If your fries are not right, and I almost watched some poor young person get smacked at 4 in the morning because someone did not like their fries, then you can ask to see the manager and they will make it right. Most people work in very large-scale organizations with bureaucratic organizational forms. Perhaps you do currently. Kennesaw State is one. If I get hit by a meteorite, somebody can step in to take my place. Somebody with similar formal, recognized education. This is another characteristic of a bureaucracy. Weber was ambivalent about this rational bureaucracy. While he saw it as an effective way to organize efficiently, it could dehumanize. This is Weber's definition of alienation, and it is like and different from Marx's definition. Weber's fear was that the system could trap incumbents or people working in the bureaucracy into a set of invariant rules and positions from which there was no alternative. He termed this the iron rule of bureaucracy. Now, Weber also paid attention to power, just as Marx did, but he came to a different conclusion. Authority is the term that Weber and other political and social theorists use to denote legitimate use of power. Hence the term legitimacy. To be legitimate, again, does not mean good. It means that the power exerted, the ability to literally force others to a collective will, is made legitimate by whatever laws are enacted into society. So police, the military, government regulatory agencies, and so forth have the authority to, for example, make sure I don't sell a bad product. They force me to follow the rules that are set out in a rational system. This authority takes 3 forms across the course of history, and Weber was as concerned about history as was Marx. For most of human history, authority was traditional. What is traditional authority? Kings, emperors, royalty. 500 years ago, the authority of a king, for example, was thought, at least in Western Europe, to stem from God. The divine right of kings, it was called. Whenever a war was fought between 2 kings for political control, if it was fought in Christendom, the victor would call the local bishop to come down and crown him. It was God's will that the victor had won. We have depictions of this in artwork, paintings of a bishop crowning a king. The second least stable form of authority is charismatic authority. Again, charisma is a neutral term. It merely means that there are some individuals who are so convincing, for whatever reason, that they can engender followers, who imbue them with authority. Any major religious figure, Christ for example, can inspire followers who in turn legitimize this authority. Charismatic authority is the most unstable form of authority. After the passing of the charismatic figure, it is tasked with the followers of the charismatic leader to, in Weber's terms, routinize charisma. After Christ dies in about 200 years, a church with formal organizations and patterns emerges to stabilize his teachings into one. As societies evolve, we see the emergence of rational authority, based on the elements that we discussed earlier. Rational authority has as its characteristic these written rules that we talked about earlier. So rules, in the case of the United States, are enacted into laws and are the source of rational authority. Again, rationality is a neutral concept. There are laws in North Korea, and there were laws in Nazi Germany, for example. Weber expands on Marx's view of social class as the great central organizer of the stratification system. Instead, stratification or inequality for Weber is based on 3 elements. Class is roughly analogous to Marx's view of social class. That is, it is based on one's ownership of productive property. But Weber does not stop there. Status is one's ability to influence others to do what they want them to do. Think of an athlete that sells athletic shoes, for example. They use their status, their position of influence, to gain resources, money in the form of endorsement pay, to gain access to an advantageous class position. There is a third element, and this is difficult because of the limited way in which it does not translate out of German well. that of party. Party is roughly equivalent to political party, but this is not really a political party in the way that we think of it. And it is, to some degree. Party is the element of government in which this legitimate rational authority lies, the power. It is the place where legitimate power, meaning power based on law and recognized as such, is created and maintained. Think about power, the ability to force the imperatives of the government. The government has the exclusive right to levy taxes, wage war, to use deadly force in defense of the public good, allegedly, to defend the social order. Now, these all come together in Weber's Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. By Protestant, Weber is referring to the Puritans who immigrated to Massachusetts around 1620, and he's referring specifically to their belief system. The Puritan Protestants at that time believed in predestinarianism. This is not a belief widely held in contemporary Christian traditions, which believe that the individual can be an agent in their own salvation. In predestinarianism, your destiny, in terms of whether you were going to heaven or hell, was mapped out for you beforehand by God. So, the Protestant Puritans looked for some outward sign of God's grace. Again, this is what they believe, and it is different from what folks believe today for the most part. So the Puritans were encouraged to work very hard and save everything. This was not a consumer-based form of capitalism. Consumption was seen as a sin. The savings were reinvested into the small enterprises engaged in by the Puritans. So the more prosperous you become, the more this was an outward sign of God's grace, that you were a member of the elect, those folks destined for heaven. But the reverse side was true. If you were poor, it was a sign that God had turned his back on you, and that you were not a member of the elect. You were predetermined not to go to heaven. Now, most of the poor were widows whose husbands had died or who were sick and who were not able to work and generate wealth. The infamous Salem witch trials, where women were accused of being witches, was a consequence of this. Because these women demonstrated no outward sign of prosperity, they were not the recipients of God's grace, according to the Puritans. Therefore, they had nothing to lose, it was thought, if they practiced witchcraft. So they were either drowned. If you were dunked in water until you drowned, this meant you were not a witch, or you were burned. Now, this way of organization could not prevail, obviously, in the Massachusetts colony, and by about 1730, a new set of religious ministers and colonial administrators saw to it that this practice and these beliefs came to an end. The belief that wealth was virtuous and that being poor was a moral failing became, as some historians put it, unmoored, that is, uncoupled from the belief that God used wealth and poverty as a way of demonstrating judgment in a way that humans could understand. But the belief that wealth is good and that poverty is a moral failing is with us today. And the mechanisms of American capitalism remain with us along with this non-rational ideology. Note that this is a completely different explanation for the evolution of capitalism than Marx's explanation. For Marx, capitalism was another historical round in the alignment of resources between those in control and those who were controlled, and it had rational origins. For Weber, however, the emergence of the capitalist system had a thoroughly non-rational and religious beliefs that morphed into secular norms about the comparative virtue of wealth versus poverty. Who can say which explanation is correct? This is not an argument that we necessarily need to have. Each of these founding theorists, Marx, Durkheim, and Weber, offer insights into society that are as relevant today as they were when they began the process of sense-making